everyone, Pepperfish is here again to hopefully give you a little bit of an insight into what is going on with the craziness in my head, I guess. Really, I just wanted to continue my discussion of my love of stories, but today I'm actually not going to talk about romance novels or Korean dramas, like I promised in my last podcast. I am planning on providing and producing, I guess, both of those podcasts, but I don't plan on doing that today. I need to sort of let the ideas sort of percolate in my head a while before I get to that. But today I actually wanted to talk about a specific type of story, I guess you could say, and provide just a couple examples. So this may not be a very long podcast, but I kind of just wanted to talk about movies that have actually physically affected me, okay? So not every movie, brings forth tears, but there are a few in my adult life. So just to give you some perspective, I know I talked a little bit about this in my last podcast, but more or less, when I was in college, I was interested in watching a wide variety of films, anything really weird and strange and perverted and that sort of stuff. Part of what was going on with me, of course, was I was really trying to push my comfort zone, and to a certain respect, I needed to prove to myself that I could watch anything and that it wouldn't affect me. So I was determined to never cry watching a movie or reading a story or anything. So I was determined, not to really be affected. I didn't want to be vulnerable to anything. I was very closed off, and it was kind of an odd situation, I guess you could say, to purposely try to provoke those feelings and then work really hard not to feel anything. So in a general sense, I guess you could say I was very rather desensitized and jaded and cynical, and but at the same time trying to prove to myself that I was exactly that. So if you want to get all pop psychology onto the whys of that, you can feel free to do so. But what I'm really going to talk about today, again, is stories that, as I was coming out of that sort of phase in my life, stories that actually started to affect me physically. And of course, usually when you think of physical reactions to stories, usually it's crying, sexual arousal too, of course, but I'm not really going to focus on that here. But I do want to talk mostly about crying and physical revulsion, the things that make you really sick, okay? So like I said, I only really have a couple examples, and I'm going to start off with the one movie that was sort of the movie that broke the dam, I guess you could say. I was determined for years never to cry at a movie, and I hadn't cried in, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, who knows. I wasn't really keeping track at that time. But I had gone years and years at never crying while watching a movie. And to be honest, I rarely cry when reading a book anyways, but so my focus today is going to be a little bit more on movies, because they tend to evoke more of a reaction, or provoke more of a reaction. So the movie that sort of broke the dam, it happened, I think I was in grad school, and my mom took me to the movie theater to see this movie, and she kept saying that she always brought a box of tissues because this is the type of movie that makes you cry, and I was just like, Mom, I'm not going to cry, I never cry. And the movie actually is a Bollywood movie. It's called Kalhonaho, starring the extremely famous Shah Rukh Khan, and he plays an interesting character. So in brief, what this story is about, I guess it's based on a traditional sort of Indian tale that speaks about a guy who is dying, and he sort of comes into this community and he helps everyone out, but it, partly because he's so, good-natured and trying to be positive, all things considered, the fact that he's dying. So, of course, this particular movie is a modern take on it, and it's about Shah Rukh Khan, who comes in meets this family, and they have some issues, and of course he falls in love with this girl, but he can't, let her know because he's dying, and he knows he can't, actually be with her in this life, and so he pushes her to fall in love instead with, her best friend, this guy, and so you would think that this epic love story, which is totally heartbreaking, would be what affected me, and it actually wasn't. Because in a way, I'd kind of, that was the type of thing that I had sort of become used to. I was used to these epic love stories that couldn't, have any real happy resolution, at least in this life, that type of thing. So, as the story goes, one member of her family is actually this little girl who is sort of the illegitimate child of the main female characters, her fathers, and she wasn't treated very nicely by some of the other members of the family, and this girl's like 11 or something like that. So of course she totally likes the main male character, Shah Rukh Khan, his character, and she totally has like a little girl crush on him, and and he always was really nice to her, of course. So I totally go through the whole movie just like, okay, this is really fun, this is really entertaining. It was the first Bollywood movie I had ever seen, and the love story unfolds, and the girl finally finds out that the reason why he pretended he wasn't in love with her was because he was dying, and so she's crying, and there's actually this really epic scene where she's just like, why do you love me so much, because she really wanted him to just be so selfish, and that kind of thing. So, you're just like, okay, yes, this is such an emotional scene. It did not make me cry, okay? So, what happens, and I'm totally going to give the ending away, but it's pretty obvious, the guy's going to die, and he does die. And what basically happens is, on his deathbed, okay, everyone is saying goodbye, and I'm totally, dry-eyed, okay? I'm sort of, used to deathbed scenes and all that, too. And here we have, the main female character is saying goodbye, and, it's supposed to be so heartbreaking. And, and he's being such a champ, and he's just like, no, you're, in the end, you're not going to marry me in this life, maybe in the next life, that type of thing. And it's supposed to be so heartbreaking, and of course, I'm not crying. And then, of course, on his deathbed, he basically, is going to the main female character saying, we're not going to get married, all well. But he turns to the little girl, because everyone is there in the room, and he turns to the little girl and just, says to her, will you marry me? And I start bawling, okay? It was all of it together, of course, but the trigger was just this little girl who loved him so much, and he, just kind of playfully says to her, will you marry me, as a joke, and I start bawling my eyes out, like, not loud. I wasn't, crying loudly, but it was like torrential downpour of tears. Mom was running out of Kleenex, I seem to remember, like she did not actually have any tissues, so I was like just, wiping tears from my eyes at the craziness, and of course it's the whole movie, brought it all to this emotional high point, but it was just a simple thing that he said, when he just turned to the little girl and asked her to marry him instead. You're just like, I can't handle it. So basically, and this was, 4, 5, 6 years ago. I don't even remember when I first saw this movie, but ever since then, I was no longer, in growing up, you kind of realize you no longer need to, prove things to yourself, and I was definitely at this point just kind of like, you know what, I'm going to cry sometimes at movies, but that being said, it's actually still fairly rare for me to cry and be affected by movies. There's only a few stories that really do bring tears to my eyes regularly, and most of them, that had, any movie that, or any story that's really brought tears to my eyes recently, I can't really think of very many. um, but I will say that I do find myself more now than ever before, like, crying at really cheesy stories, like the kind of stuff that I would have been ashamed to be affected by when I was younger. So, like for Christmas this past year, someone had given me sort of just like a cute little, cool kind of 12 Days of Christmas gift where it has 12 different stories, and like a little associated, an associated gift with that story. Just really basic stuff like ornaments and cookie dough and stuff like that. And of course, all of the stories were the type of like chicken soup for the soul Christmas stories. The little boy who wanted to give a gift to his friend, but their family didn't celebrate Christmas, and so he had to do it anonymously. But he's like death, and he ends up like, getting almost caught giving this gift anonymously, and he gets like caught in this electric fence and zapped, and then because he was zapped, his hearing comes back. I mean, just like there's one very large part of my brain that's just like, oh my gosh, this is so cheesy, and then the other part of me is totally crying. So I've totally found myself now, susceptible to crying. And I don't even know what the common thread is, is it maybe just whenever there's little kids involved, just maybe I am getting older and at that age, who knows. But so it's just hilarious that, movies do make me cry now. So those were, Calhoun is definitely the big one that really stands out in my mind. And I'm sure there are others, but I just can't really think of any. The other type of physical reaction that I have now to movies is sort of revulsion and the feeling of nausea to the point of wanting to almost throw up. Very rare, and definitely not something that I ever really felt when I was younger and trying hard not to, be affected. That was the time, like I said, when I would purposely watch really bizarre films, and some of that stuff, might just, now might really be disgusting to me. So, but for the most part, I still feel like I'm fairly desensitized to a lot of, either violence or that type of, crudeness or whatever. So I've definitely changed a lot, I guess you could say, in that, I don't really watch horror films as much as I used to. I used to watch horror films and, not want to feel anything. Well, I definitely would feel, a certain amount of fear, but, oh, that wasn't disgusting. That wasn't that crazy. That was funny, So many horror films are actually kind of funny. But the whole thing is that, as I got older, I have definitely, I haven't seen any of the Saw movies. I never saw any of the Hostel movies because I just, torture porn is not really what I'm interested in. But at the same time, there used to be a time when I would watch that stuff to prove to myself that I could and wouldn't be affected by it. So, that being said, there is this one movie, and I haven't even watched the movie because the trailer alone disgusts me so much, and I wouldn't even necessarily say that it is the visuals of the trailer, but the concept alone disgusted me when I first read about it. And I don't know if it's like maybe that day I just wasn't feeling very well, and now I just always associate nausea when I think of this movie. But there is a movie that came out I think a couple years ago called The Human Centipede, and if you can kind of guess what that is, yeah, feel free to do so. But it is a movie, I guess I'll just describe it and get it over with. So it's about, of course, some mad scientist who wants to make a human centipede out of multiple people, and essentially, goes to work and kidnapping people, and so it's a type of horror film. And as I'm talking about it right now, I'm getting nauseous. And basically what he does, he has to find people with a certain, physical genetics or something that would make it work. Just, of course, just, movie BS. But essentially he wants to surgically connect people's mouths, like one person's mouth to another person's anus, so that they have one united digestive system, and that they're supposed to be one organism, right? I mean, that's his what he's attempting to do, and so he kidnaps these people, and he's trying to do this. So, disgusting. Okay, I just have to say that, yeah, that is so disgusting, Bizarro, definitely. And the trailer, I don't remember even how I came across the trailer. I seem to remember me being, like, at work or something, and during lunch, because I tend to just roam around online at lunchtime, and I think I may have somehow come across the trailer. And I just remember, like, reading the Wikipedia article about the movie, about what it is, and I was just, like, so grossed out and nauseated. Even to this day, like, when I think about it, like, I don't really want to think about this movie. And so that's why I'm going to podcast about it, and then I'm going to try and forget about this movie. Because I always get this physical sense of nausea and revulsion at the idea. So I guess I will now let that movie go, let it cleanse from my mind, and try to move on. So, that's all I really wanted to talk about. Just these two movies, and the two types of physical reactions that I now have to movies that I didn't at one point in time in my life. And it's always kind of interesting and kind of random, the movies that really may affect you. And it's, I guess surprising sometimes. You may not be as affected by some movies that are working to make you cry. They're everything about them is designed to make you cry. And then you have others that actually make you cry. And so, anywho, kind of random, but these are at least the most recent movies that, in my older age, in my more open state of mind, actually causes me to have physical reactions. So, anyways, I hope you guys are having a good weekend. I'm going to attempt to start podcasting over the weekends, so this is my first attempt to see, will Saturdays work? Anywho, have fun out there.